Hi, my name is Chris Ralph, and today we're going to talk about Nevada turquoise. Now, it's a really interesting topic, and actually, turquoise was probably the first gemstone ever used by mankind because it's so soft and easy to cut. We're going to talk about what turquoise is and how turquoise forms. We're going to talk about some turquoise related minerals that some people kind of mistake for turquoise sometimes because they look sort of similar. We're going to talk about where Nevada turquoise is found, and we're going to talk about something you may never have heard of before, and that's the relationship of Nevada turquoise and Nevada gold. It's not an accident that Nevada is probably the biggest producer of turquoise, or at least historically, the largest producer of turquoise in the United States, and it's also historically the largest producer of gold in the United States. And yup, if you're saying, no, it's California, you're wrong, because in the last 50 years or so, there's so much gold that's come out of Nevada. Yeah, the total production of Nevada is greater than California. And we're also going to talk about just the inherent beauty of Nevada turquoise, because it's just comes in an array of colors and an array of patterns. It's just a really beautiful stone for all sorts of gem use. So let's get started. Now, the history of turquoise across the earth. Turquoise is one of the first gems worked by mankind. Like I say, it's been treasured for thousands of years, and it's because it's soft enough and yet it's beautiful. The blues and greens and the patterns, it's just been used by mankind from the earliest times of civilization. And now a lot of people think of a bright blue color for turquoise, but the truth is it comes in all sorts of colors and mostly shades of bluish to dark, light blue to dark blue, and then a lot of shades of greenish from bluish green, greenish blue, and often sometimes a mix of colors in the same stone. Now, Chinese people have treasured turquoise for many centuries, but it was also treasured by the Egyptians. And the Chinese considered turquoise only second to jade. And of course, the Native American peoples of the U.S. have long mined and treasured turquoise. They were making necklace strands and other turquoise jewelry by hand methods centuries before the first European settlers arrived. Now, the Europeans, when they arrived, they brought with them technologies for working metals like silver. And American Indians then turned this experience and knowledge of working metals and combined that with their turquoise to develop their own special style of jewelry, which we're familiar with. The word turquoise is probably derived from the French term meaning Turkish stone. It was first used by the French and other European traders as a beautiful stone that arrived into Europe from Turkey. But actually, the stone wasn't mined in Turkey. It was actually Persian turquoise, which is very famous and comes from mines in what is now known as Iran. Now, the history of turquoise in the Americas. Now, first, turquoise came into popular fashion. Turquoise has historically been a gemstone that's subject to the whims of fashion. It literally goes in and out and in and out of style over time. And the first real push that it came into high fashion was actually during the 1890s. And at that time, there weren't a lot of important turquoise mines in the United States that were known, and so Persian turquoise was used in the beautiful jewelry of the 1890s. Later, a number of high quality turquoise deposits, some of them which were previously worked by Native Americans, were rediscovered. And shortly after 1900, Americans began to see that American turquoise from the western U.S. was the equal of any in the world. And interest again began to peak around 1908, 1910, and a considerable amount of American turquoise was mined in that time frame, especially from the state of Nevada. Now, the majority of the turquoise jewelry produced prior to 1910 was made by well-known jewelry companies like Tiffany's and the like, and it was produced in standard styles of the times. It wasn't made in the characteristic Indian style that we're used to seeing turquoise in so commonly. There were a few Native Americans making turquoise and silver pieces in this time frame in the style that we now know as the traditional Indian style, but they produced only a few pieces, and their simple tools made the amount of hours needed for each piece grow higher and higher. And so there just isn't a lot of that kind of jewelry out and about. Um, the interest in genuine traditional Indian turquoise jewelry began in earnest during the 1920s when people from outside the Southwest began to see the beauty of this artistic jewelry. It was actually common that a lot of people would travel by train across the West. And of course, in the 20s, people were familiar with stories of the Wild West, and even they'd seen, you know, crazy cowboys in the movies, and they expected the Wild West, the Western United States, to look a lot like what they saw in the movies. Of course, it wasn't. But there were a number of restaurant chains, the Harvey House and others, that featured this Indian jewelry as curios to the patrons that were coming by train coming west. And after that time, the people began to really appreciate it, and it was a special memento of their travels west. Um, Around that time, the squash blossom necklace thing began to get started, and it kept going at least until 1940, when many Indians discontinued their use because they required a lot of work and just too much turquoise to make them. Now, from 1920s to the present, it began to be noticed that Native American jewelry had a significant potential to provide a reliable income source to tribal members. And so during those years, there were schools and classes that were established to train young men in the art of making sterling and turquoise jewelry in the Native American style. And in the following decades, many of these very talented artists came out of these schools and got established making some really beautiful pieces of jewelry. During the years following World War II, a number of trading posts sprang up in the Southwest, and they would buy these pieces and sell them. And they were really shops that also sold a variety of Native American crafts. And people began to really appreciate the differences in matrix patterns and colors between the different mine sources. It was during this time, which extended into the early 1950s, that turquoise began to be named, for sales purposes anyway, after the mine in which it was found. And so there was Lone Mountain turquoise, Royston, Blue Gem, and others that became well known. Now, a lot of Indians continued doing this handicraft silver jewelry in the 1950s and the early 1960s in the traditional way. Up to that time, their work was generally popular only in the southwest region of the U.S., but it began to see a larger and larger audience, and again, it began to become an exciting fashion fad. And by the late 60s and early 70s, it really was quite the rage of the American fashion scene. The prices of old pawn jewelry that were in the shops in the trading posts began to skyrocket, and manufacturers ordered pieces of Indian style jewelry to be made by manufacturers in Mexico, Taiwan, and the Philippines. And at the same time, the market was glutted with synthetic, stabilized, and plastic imitation look-alike turquoise. And by 1981, the supply was high and there was lots of jewelry. But as the whims of fashion go, you know, you're in fashion and then you're out of fashion. And turquoise by the early 80s was considered gauche as far as fashion was concerned. You know, nobody who was in would wear turquoise. And the market collapsed, and most of the American turquoise mines that had been operating were shut down and have remained closed mostly since that time. The turquoise demand hit a low water mark a few years later in the early 80s, but it has been slowly increasing in popularity since that time. Now, what is turquoise? Now we'll get into kind of the meat of this. We've talked about history. So what is turquoise? Turquoise is what is known as a secondary mineral, and it forms as the result of weathering of other minerals. So as the rainwater and the effects of weather and oxygen in the air, affect minerals in the rocks. Literally, the effect is actually to dissolve them, some of them anyway, some of the elements. And the water that comes from the rain will pick up these elements that are essential and carry the elements to places where they get deposited. Now, turquoise is a combination of certain elements. It's a copper aluminum phosphate, so it needs copper, it needs aluminum, it needs phosphate, and it needs water to carry it. Now, it's common that turquoise also has iron in minor amounts, which tends to give it a greenish tint, or silica, which tends to harden the stone. All these minerals, all these things, the copper, the aluminum, phosphate, water, iron, and silica combine to make turquoise. Literally, as the material is drying out, it forms into turquoise. So the waters leach downward from the rain and leach the weathered rocks, and as it dries over long periods of time, turquoise is deposited in the rock. So turquoise, because of this, because the drying is required, turquoise is found only in arid places, places where there's not too much water. So you think about places where turquoise is mined, and they're all desert to arid, semi-desert type of places, because wet places like jungles or wet forests and that sort of thing just don't have the drying element necessary to form the turquoise. So turquoise forms mostly as nuggets or veins in cracks. Now, in Nevada and a lot of other places, the two most common forms are nugget form and vein form. And on the left, you'll see a bunch of nuggets of turquoise just as they came out of the ground. And on the right, you see a little crack, a crack in the rock, in a face of rock, and the crack is filled with turquoise. So here's a couple of other nugget type pieces of turquoise. And the nuggets will form in clay seams. That's how they grow. It's literally a seam in the rock that's been filled with clay. And as the turquoise elements get in there, they'll start to grow. And they will want to grow on top of other elements of turquoise. So if a little bit of turquoise forms, then the next time water comes down, the elements of turquoise will want to stick to that previous one, and so on and so on and so on. And so it grows into these nuggets. And then the other form is the vein type, which forms in cracks in the rock. So a crack will fill with turquoise. Now, turquoise is cut normally into a cabochon, which is a smooth dome-typed stone. And what's done is it's sawn and then shaped and given a rough shape and a flat bottom and put on a stick like this, which is called a dop stick. And then it's the finish rounding and polishing is done while it's mounted on the stick. It's generally easy to cut and polish, but the problem is turquoise can be fragile, and sometimes to deal with that, and especially when the pieces are kind of thin, turquoise lapidary artists will put a backing on there and will attach the thin turquoise to some harder substrate so that it won't have a tendency to crack. And the other thing is a lot of turquoise tends to be chalky and may not polish very well. And that's this chalky turquoise that's not as hard is the type of stuff that normally gets impregnated with plastic resin and hardened up, and then the turquoise, after it's absorbed, the chalky turquoise, after it's absorbed the resin, will have a much better color, and it'll be hard enough that it can be cut and used in a piece of jewelry. So let's take a look at some minerals that are similar in appearance to turquoise but aren't. The first and probably best known is a mineral called chrysocolla. It also is a copper mineral. It has about the same percentage of copper as turquoise, and so you see the blues are in the same color range. The green, as you can see in a couple of these pictures, is malachite, which is a copper carbonate. But the blue is sometimes mistaken for turquoise because, like I say, it's a similar color. And then it can also be cut as a gemstone. Now, chrysocolla cuts to what they call gem chrysocolla or gem silica. It's a really beautiful stone. It's a beautiful stone in its own right. The colors of it and so on make it really attractive. So it's a good gemstone. Now, here's another mineral related to turquoise. It's called variscite. And it's a greenish tone usually. And it's basically a aluminum phosphate without the copper. See, turquoise is a copper aluminum phosphate, and this is just aluminum phosphate, no copper, or little copper, very little. And you can see on the right, there's a specimen of Utah variscite, and then on the left, some little stones of Nevada variscite. Pretty stuff it is. I mean, it's a nice gemstone in its own right. Here's another Nevada gemstone that looks similar to turquoise, but is not. It's called chalcosiderite, and it has a similar appearance. You can note the spider webbing, and it's also a secondary mineral that forms in cracks and forms as nuggets, and it contains a little copper, mostly iron. It has much more iron than copper, and so it's a copper aluminum, or it's mostly an iron aluminum phosphate with a little bit of copper in it. Now, there's a whole lot of simulated turquoise and imitation turquoise that's made. Here's some blocks. They're just literally like pressed out of a machine. They're not real. They're just plastic. But you can see that they can make that plastic look a lot like real turquoise. And turquoise from China tends to be soft and chalky. And I mentioned they get reinforced with plastic to allow them to have better color and take a good color, a good polish. But this extruded plastic can be mixed in any color the buyer wants, and even spiderweb types can be extruded in these plastic blocks. And it can make them any color that they want. They can make it red or pink or purple, or it doesn't really matter. They can add the right agents to make the plastic quote unquote turquoise look. It's a turquoise simulant. They can make it look like turquoise. So always be careful when you're buying stuff. You don't want to buy a chunk of pretty plastic and pay the turquoise price for it. So let's talk about Nevada turquoise specifically. Native American peoples first mined turquoise in Nevada long before European settlers arrived. The Fox and Crescent Peak deposits were worked extensively, and to a lesser degree, some of the prospects in Royston were worked as well. For centuries, going back to the times of the Anasazi, native peoples of Nevada produced beautiful necklaces and other decorative and sacred items. I've seen a number of them in museums that they used in various functions. They cherished them. But unlike the tribes of Arizona that also cherished turquoise, the Nevada tribes didn't ever adopt this silver working art, and so they never produced a style that was traditional for the crafts, traditional Indian jewelry for like Paiute or Shoshone tribes in Nevada. Whereas in Arizona, there are specific types for the different tribes. You can look at them and they tend to be in a certain style, and the tribal members of that tribe tend to follow a certain general style. Now, the first Nevada turquoise discovery was made by European prospectors in the early 1870s, or the first discovery that was made by European settlers or European descended settlers. At that time, it was only the second turquoise deposit in the U.S. known to European miners. The other was in New Mexico. When turquoise became fashionable during the period of 1910, high prices attracted attention, and a number of prospectors from Nevada went out to find new discoveries. And actually, there are, a huge number of turquoise deposits in Nevada. and it's something worth investigating if you're interested in that sort of thing. And by the 20s and 30s, turquoise was back into vogue, and increased prices led to more and more new discoveries, mostly in Lander County, farther to the north. In the 60s and 70s, the high turquoise prices led to a whole lot of new discoveries, and boy, it seems like every little turquoise prospect was opened up with a bulldozer and turquoise taken out because Nevada produced literally tons and tons. Probably from the 1930s into the 1980s, Nevada was the largest producer of turquoise in the U.S. And, in this era of smaller producers, we still may be among the largest producers in the U.S. Nevada turquoise is famous for its beautiful colors, beautiful patterns, and excellent quality. A lot of it is not chalk, and it is good and hard, and really stuff that's very suitable for jewelry without any treatment. The number of turquoise deposits in the state of Nevada far exceeds all of the rest of the number in the United States and the other states combined. So the other 49 states, the number of turquoise prospects they have, yeah, all combined is less than Nevada. And that's because there's a special relationship of Nevada turquoise and Nevada gold. But we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. The total value of the turquoise taken out from the state of Nevada is estimated to comfortably exceed $250 million worth of turquoise. That's pretty impressive. Here's some beautiful examples of Nevada turquoise in blues and greens and various types of patterns. It's just really amazing stuff. And there's a characteristic that each mine kind of semi-produces material that is related and looks similar. So, you tend to get turquoise that has a related look from one mine. But it isn't always the case. I've seen stuff that doesn't really fit the bill, the average bill. And my opinion is that most mines, what you find is the bulk of the production looks like one thing, but there's always some that's different and not really exactly what you expect from that mine. So here's the names of some famous Nevada turquoise mines: the Caraco mine, the Fox mine, Royston, Lander Blue, Lone Mountain, the Blue Gem, the number 8 mine, Red Mountain, McGinnis, Pilot Mountain, Stormy Mountain, and Indian Mountain. It just produces beautiful stuff. Really interesting patterns and interesting changes of color. It's just, Nevada is just famous for its really beautiful turquoise. So here's a map of the principal Nevada turquoise, and you can see that it kind of follows a line, or at least the bulk of the turquoise deposits follow a line that goes not quite due north-south, but a little bit northeast-southwest. And interestingly enough, this is the axis, or at least some of the areas that Nevada is famous for producing gold from as well. And so let's talk about that, the unexpected relationship of Nevada turquoise and Nevada gold. Nevada, like I say, has produced more gold than any other state. And historically, in the old days, if you said like before 1950, California would have been the biggest producer. But since 1950, Nevada, actually since the early 60s, Nevada has been producing gold from big, giant open pit mines at a rate of many millions of ounces per year. And year after year of many millions of ounces has added up, and Nevada is now the state in the union with the largest gold production. Now you can see the lady here on the right. She's holding a gold pan that's just full of giant nuggets. That took 2 hours to find with metal detectors. That's all. That's 2 hours worth of work. And I'm told that that pan weighed about 70 pounds for the gold that was in it, and that there were two strong guys that helped get the lady and the pan into position for a photograph. And then as soon as she said, okay, I'm stable, the two guys stepped out of the picture, and the picture was taken of just her holding the pan. But this is many, many pounds of gold, and Nevada is famous for the huge amounts of gold that it produces. So why is Nevada turquoise and Nevada gold related? Well, there's some unusual combinations of geologic conditions which have come together to form the high quality turquoise at many places in Nevada. It's basically regional thrust faulting and widespread fracturing which opened the necessary voids for the turquoise to form. It also turned out by lucky coincidence that those sedimentary rocks which were broken just happened to be high in aluminum and phosphate, which is two of the essential elements of turquoise. Now, the mountain building processes that built up the basin and range region, which Nevada occupies, also intruded widespread low-grade copper mineralization. And together with Nevada's generally arid environment and sufficient amount of time, the fracturing, the aluminum, the phosphate, and the copper all came together to form some really beautiful world-class turquoise deposits. The mountain building processes which have caused the silicification has also made sure that a high percentage of Nevada turquoise is hard and of true gem quality. Now, these same systems that led to the formation of turquoise, the same mountain building and mineralization and breaking and thrust faulting, also led to the formation of these super rich gold deposits that produce millions of ounces of gold. Other deposits like barite were created as well, and it leads to a situation where it's fairly common to find gold deposits in or around the general neighborhood of turquoise mines in Nevada. And a lot of people don't realize this, but some of the biggest turquoise mines have been actually, at least the area around them has been mined for gold. One of the biggest gold producers in Nevada is actually named Turquoise Ridge. And out at Cortez, where there's a lot of really big, huge producers of gold, there's the Fox Mine and a number of other turquoise mines right in the same neighborhood. This is also why a lot of old turquoise properties have been explored and taken over by Nevada mining companies, but they're exploring these regions for gold. The formation of the unusual gold deposits in Nevada has been a huge boom to the state, but it's also unfortunately led to a number of turquoise properties being tied up or mined out as gold mines, and potential turquoise properties are otherwise tied up because they're under control of the gold mining companies. The net result of this situation is that limits the amount of high quality Nevada turquoise available on the U.S. market. Now, turquoise is still mined in Nevada, but generally it's on a very small scale. A very small scale that's done by breaking it out of rock with a pick or a hammer or use of a bulldozer. The miners don't want to use blasting because you don't want to break your beautiful turquoise into dust by blowing it up. And you don't want to even fracture it unnecessarily because that would make it unsuitable for gem use. So bulldozers, rip and remove what they can, and some is mined by hand with pick and shovel, and some very limited use of light explosives. And some even use the new non-exploding foam fracturing. It's a material that you put into a drill hole and mix it up and let it sit overnight, and slow expansion of the material fractures the rock without an explosion. So it gives very good quality to the turquoise. It doesn't break it up. It's a very labor-intensive process no matter how you slice it, and so it's no accident that most of the world's current turquoise supply now comes from China, where manual labor costs are extremely low. Most of the turquoise mined worldwide is just not hard enough for use without treatment. Some material is so soft that it can be gouged and cut with a knife, and this stuff is often termed chalk. At the same time, that kind of stone can't be used by jewelry craftsmen without first being impregnated with plastic. Only a small part of the world's turquoise comes right out of the ground, suitable for gem use as top gem grade, and this kind of turquoise is hard and won't scratch easily with everyday use. It's rare, and the cost of hand mining contribute to its high cost. A good percentage of Nevada turquoise is this hard material, which can be used as gems without any treatment. So let's take a look at some Indian turquoise made with Nevada gems. Isn't that stuff really just amazing in its color, blues and greens, different sorts of spiderweb and other patterns? Nevada just produces some really beautiful stuff. Here's some more turquoise made with Nevada material. It just is really, really spectacular, and Nevada is really an amazing turquoise producer. Well, in closing, I want to talk a little bit about my book, Fistful of Gold. For those of you who are interested in learning more about gold and perhaps going out in the hills and finding your own gold, which is very possible and very doable, you want this book. It's an encyclopedia of everything you need to know about prospecting, panning, sluicing, metal detecting, dry washing, how to read maps, how to figure things out, how to do research and study to find gold deposits. It really is the guide that you want if you're interested in this, whether you're an experienced prospector who's been doing it for years or just a new guy. This is the book you want if you don't already have it. It's available now on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and enter Fistful of Gold by Chris Ralph, and I guarantee it'll come up. I also have a free online prospecting encyclopedia and a lot of information there about gold and gemstones. Check it out. Check out my webpage at Nevada Outback Gems prospect/chrisprospect.htm. That's the URL for it. There are just gobs of information on that website. And finally, if you like this presentation and you want to learn more about gold and maybe gemstones as well, then I'm going to do more videos on this. More gold and silver and gemstone videos are coming, both in the form of these slideshow presentations as well as live action videos in the field. So click on the subscribe button and click the notification bell, and YouTube will let you know when I publish new stuff. It's going to be coming out quite a bit. So hit the like button as well, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free. I will answer them. And I wish you the best of luck in all your prospecting, whether you're looking for gemstones or gold or both.